Welcome into episode 8 of Carol's Cadence, a show dedicated to bringing you objective but entertaining coverage of Florida Gators football, basketball, and recruiting. I'm Brandon Carroll, the lead reporter over at allgators.com, and oh man, am I excited for what we got for y'all today. Before we get into it, make sure to click that like button, hammer that subscribe as we're on the road to 400 subscribers, and comment a bold take for Florida's 2023 season down below. It can be individual player stats that you think might be exceeded, the team's win-loss record, or really just anything you believe that others may not. I want to hear it. Let me hear it. We got a packed show for y'all today. I'm going to be discussing Florida's first scrimmage and some of the notes that I've heard from that period. Obviously, it was closed to media. And then we'll get into Cam Rising's availability for week one, kind of being thrown even more into limbo than it already was, as he has yet to take that next step in his participation level. And then we'll discuss some of Florida's own attrition getting into the 2023 season. There's been some injuries that have piled up for Florida in fall camp, which could be an issue. But sit back, relax, try your best to look busy at work, and let's enjoy this beautiful Friday as we get into the weekend with some Carol's Cadence football talk. Let's get this thing popping, baby. Yeah, man. Florida had their first scrimmage of the year on Thursday afternoon, and from what I've gathered, there was a lot of positives to take away from this period. And it's not just at positions that are proven. It's not just at the running back. Obviously, we all know Montrell Johnson and Trevor Etienne have that spot locked up. That is a spot that is going to be no worries all year long, barring any type of injury. But those weren't the positions that really made the waves that we've seen, that have been echoed, magnified from this practice period, from this scrimmage period. It were some of the questions that I brought up at previous points throughout this 8-episode journey for this Florida team in 2023 that kind of started to be answered. There was a lot of spots that I have personally been questioning for this Florida team, that the first scrimmage, at least the notes that we've received from it, it seems like they're on their way to, potentially being better than we thought. And I think it starts at quarterback. Graham Mertz came in, Wisconsin transfer, to replace Anthony Richardson from last season to be Florida's starting quarterback. And while he technically has not been named as that starting quarterback yet, I believe in about 30 or so minutes when Billy Napier takes the podium, that'll be one of the first things that he does is officially name Graham Mertz as the starter for the 2023 season. He said he wants to have one right before the first scrimmage of fall camp. That was yesterday. So here we are. It's the first time he's getting the opportunity to speak to media. Graham Mertz is about to be your starting quarterback for the 2023 season. And on Thursday, during that scrimmage period, he did what he had to do. It was the second time since Saturday's open practice that the former Badger kind of made noise for being able to do what he's asked of him to manage the game the way that Florida wants him to. He was able to kind of make the consistent short and intermediate passing game work, make it tick, made well-timed throws to open windows and open receivers, and just really taking what the defense gives him. He took it. If the defense gave him a crosser, he was hitting that crosser. And I've said it before, this won't be a team that airs out the football. They're going to be heavily dependent on running the ball. That's what they want to do. If you go back and you watched Napier's offenses at Louisiana Lafayette, when they were at their best, they were running the football very consistently. They were setting the tone as a running offense with complementary passes. And they did that to an extent last season. But I think that's going to be magnified this year with what Florida tries to do. But that doesn't mean they're not going to still utilize the passing game. They'll just do it at a short to intermediate, at the short and intermediate levels rather than targeting deep down the field. So Mertz kind of showed that he can make the 15-yard crosser over the middle, or he can make the throw on the 15-yard crosser over the middle to extend the drive, to move the chains, and just help this offense be sustainable, maybe more sustainable than previously expected. And while his job is to manage Florida's offense, he did just that on Thursday. He did his job. He managed Florida's offense, and He proved fruitful in that role. And then you have a trio of freshman wideouts that had themselves a day. Must be Groundhog Day again. Andy Jean, Eugene Wilson, Aiden Mizell all made significant impacts for this offense, whether it was on the first team, second team, third team. They were doing what they needed to do and helping that wide receiver room kind of take a step forward as they've provided the much needed speed and really just talent into this unit that hasn't been there since 2020. I think personally, it's kind of a foreshadowing of how this trio will perform in 2023, how they'll operate in game, because I find it specifically hard to keep Andy Jean and Eugene Wilson off the field in week 1. Because Andy Jean is one of the most polished route runners I've seen come out of the high school level and directly to college. He translates it because what he did at the prep level directly translates to the college game. He was ahead of his time and mature in his ability to create separation at the top and just route run in general. I don't see Florida having the ability to say, okay, we're going to put this guy on the bench and let him, get a few snaps a game. No, I think he's going to be someone that contributes consistently. He's an X-type wide receiver, an X-receiver type player that Florida needs right now. They need him to perform, and I think that as a result, he's going to see the field pretty consistently. And then you have Eugene Wilson, who has completely reshaped himself to put himself in playing shape, SEC football shape, the shape needed to perform at the highest level of college football that there is. And he's as shifty as they come in open space. He's just seemingly moves at a different pace than everyone else on the field. You've seen it in clips. I've seen it several times in person this fall. That speed is real. So you get him, working in some gimmick plays early in the season as he continues to grow his knowledge as someone who enrolled late. He wasn't an early enrollee. He was one of the 4 that were left to enroll this summer. You have him kind of working in a role where he just get the ball in his hands and let him work until he fully immerses himself within this offense. That's best case scenario for Florida. They are in a great position to let him just work, let him just make a play. And I think that he continues to show that he can do that. And that's not necessarily a knock on Aiden Mizell. I think Mizell is going to be a fantastic talent from Florida. I think he's very talented. Obviously, the straight line speed, the track level speed is real. He's proved it at points. He had a long touchdown during the scrimmage on Thursday. But in this offense where Florida is looking at a legitimate deep threat, they're also, or where he's a legitimate deep threat, they're not looking to necessarily target that point of the field. And with his weight sitting at, right in the 170s, mid 170s, I'm not sold that that's necessarily going to be something that he can, that allows Florida to play him at the rate of the other two, because they don't want him to get hurt. They don't want to, delay any type of progression forward for Mizell. But he'll still see snaps. I think he sees snaps more as the year goes on. That was really my point I'm trying to make. He'll see the opportunities to play early in the year, but as the season goes on, you'll see just a steady increase of how much Mizell, number 11, is on the field. You'll see a steady increase of him being able to make plays because the talent's undeniable. The talent for all 3 of them are undeniable. But I'm just not sure what his role looks like week 1. But that rotational role that he's set to occupy, it's going to expand throughout the season. And all 3 of those guys are going to be crucial for Florida's offense this year through the passing game, whether it be, downfield, just when they do decide to take shots in the short and intermediate, or really, if Eugene Wilson takes a screen pass, or, they go bubble or tunnel with Andy Jean. So there's going to be so many different ways you can utilize this group. And as a result, I think Florida is in a great spot with their young talent in this receiver room, not just for this year, but for years to come when DJ Lagway steps in to the starting quarterback position. And then there were more freshman contributors defensively. Jordan Castell and TJ Searcy stood out. They joined Kelby Collins, Jakeem Jackson, Deshaun Johnson as guys that have kind of been named multiple times as, okay, these guys are probably going to legitimately contribute this fall in a big way this fall. They proved that they can do that. Jordan Castell is probably going to step into a safety role sooner rather than later. TJ Searcy is going to step into an edge role sooner rather than later. And then obviously the other three, Kelby Collins going to play off the edge. Jakeem Jackson's going to, probably play in that 4 deep cornerback rotation, 5 deep if Dijon Johnson continues to progress the way that he's looking as if he's progressing. And then further back in that secondary, you have Michigan transfer RJ Moten, who's really kind of settling in as the defensive leader in this defense and as the leader of what this defense wants to do. Because you look at what how this unit operates, RJ Moten is the quarterback of the defense. Communication starts there, and that was something that stood out to a lot of people during this scrimmage was communication in the back ends continued to improve. And I know it didn't take much improving from years past. It was, an oft criticized aspect of Florida's team. It's like, okay, they just have no idea what they're doing. Is this a coaching problem? Is this a on-field communication problem? I think it's a little bit of both, but the communication aspect of things seems to be trending in the right direction. And Moten, even though he's a new from, coming in from Michigan this summer, he's still looking as if he's progressing in that way. And he told media on Wednesday that he's adjusting well. He's adjusting well to being that quarterback of the defense. And I know it's weird because a lot of the times you're like, no, quarterback of the defense is a middle linebacker. And in most cases, that's true. But in Florida's defense, the Gators liked Austin Armstrong and even Patrick Toney was like this. They like to operate from their safeties down. They like it to be a trickle-down effect because the safety can see the whole field. The safety can be everyone's eyes at once. He has everything in front of him. Whereas a middle linebacker does not have the safeties in front of him. He can't see all of that. He sees everything in front of him in that second level, but there's a lot that's still going on outside of him, beyond his peripheral. And then also behind him, safety RJ Moten can be that eye for the entire team and say, hey, call checks and just be someone that ensures this Florida defense is aligned and prepared for what offenses are bringing to them. And it seemed on Thursday that he was not just taking that step, but he was almost there for this defense. He's transitioning into that leadership role, and he's transitioning into that communicating, just into the defense itself as a communicator, leader, player, and understanding his job. And I think that's going to be a big portion of a lot of Florida football this year. Understand your job, do it well. And I know it's a cliche. I know, the Patriots have always been do your job, but it's so important. It's a crucial aspect of how this team will perform this year. And then you have a guy like Jack Pyburn. Jack Pyburn showed out on Thursday. 3 sacks from the end role that really was set to be occupied by Justice Boone this year at a pretty high rate. But Boone went down with an injury during the scrimmage, which we'll touch on here in a little bit. If it is severe, Jack Pyburn put himself in the position to potentially take on that role in 2023. He just wreaked havoc on Florida's backfield. Like I said, 3 sacks was just a microcosm of this much improved defensive line unit from the end role. I know, a lot of time when I talk about players, especially on the defensive line, I'll be like, oh, the mean streak, their willingness to thump heads. If you were to look up in the dictionary, the definition of a mean streak, Jack Pyburn's face, there's a picture of it right next to the word. Jack Pyburn's face right next to it. He is the definition of a mean streak when he steps on the football field. His tape at Bowles High School in Jacksonville, Florida, fun football to watch. Bro got after it, and it showed. That mean streak showed. And it sounds like he once again got after it on Thursday. And good news for Florida as they're potentially looking to fill this role after an unfortunate injury to Justice Boone, who is set to have a breakout season in 2023. And so I'm not going to sit here and say that Pyburn's definitely the guy. And obviously we have to wait to see how severe, how serious this injury for Boone is. But if he's unable to go, even if he isn't unable to go, Pyburn put himself in a great position to at least receive some rotational snaps this year. So watch out for the Duval baby, y'all. He could very well be the guy that fills that role. Duval baby, he coming. He is coming. So I'm just gonna let y'all know, Pyburn, there's something special about that kid, and I think that there's about that young man, I should say, and it could be something that arises sooner than later for the redshirt, or I think he's a sophomore, for the sophomore. But transitioning into an injury on the opposite side of the week 1 scale, and I know there's going to be a lot of injury talk trickled into this episode, so just bear with me. But 8 months ago, the Utah Utes were obviously taking on the Penn State Nittany Lions in their second straight Rose Bowl appearance. And in that contest, quarterback Cameron Rising, who's now started 23 games for the Utah Utes over 2 seasons, he's played in all 26, suffered a torn ACL. Obviously, that was something that happened during the game. They came out and said they weren't sure how severe it was. And then about a month later, Rising comes out and says it was a torn ACL. He had to undergo surgery soon thereafter. And it set him on an extensive rehabilitation track, because a torn ACL in recovering it in just over 8 months that's a difficult thing to do. But there was always hope that he could return week 1. There was always, there's a probability that he would be ready for week 1. And it seemed as if he was on the right progression track to be able to do that, to be able to step onto the field to take on the Florida Gators on August 31st in Salt Lake. But now, while the Gators are on that schedule to head to Salt Lake for the rematch of the 2022 season opener in 20 days, 20 days as of today, Rising's status is still relatively unknown, because at one point, like I said, he was ahead of schedule, assured the nation that he'd be ready to take the field. And it seemed as if that was the case up until just earlier this week, when it proved that it might not be, because head coach Kyle Whittingham, one of the longest tenured head coaches in college football, if not the longest, he's been there for this is his 19th season with the Utes, said that quarterback situation's still in flux. And that's verbatim. It's still in flux. And so I think Rising is obviously the major factor in that, but it goes deeper. The quarterback situation at Utah is, I don't want to say messy, because they have pieces, but there's so much unknown there right now for the Utes. And so right now, Whittingham said that Cam's in the mode he's in until doctors tell us that he can progress from there. So he's sitting in limbo. He's sitting, waiting to progress to that next step, take that next step in his participation. And as a result, Whittingham continued to say there will be a time when that starts to get a little bit tenuous, though. If we get a week out and he's still not ready to roll, if that happens, we have to make some decisions. So that automatically, obviously, is not great for Utah. That creates kind of some panic for Utah fans, and even for people inside the building, as the guy that's been so consistent and so important to their success over the past few years might not be able to go. And then you look down, and if he's forced to make that decision where, okay, Cam can't go, who's going to be the next man up? Right now, there's not even a QB2 in Salt Lake. There's a 3-man competition at that spot, and it isn't sounding like there's much movement on that front. Obviously, I have Bryson Barnes, who's been pretty consistent and probably the most experienced, or he is the most experienced in the group. Nate Johnson and Brandon Rose are the 3 competing for that spot behind Rising, which could potentially turn into much, much more very quickly if Rising cannot go week 1. Like I said, Barnes is the most experienced at this position, but he did show some glaring inconsistencies when he has seen the field. I think he has a 5 touchdown, 2 interception career stat line for like 600 some yards. Johnson, the second quarterback I named, he's seen action, but he's been used widely as a running quarterback for Utah. He has 1 pass attempt to his name in his career. And then Brandon Rose has never seen a snap as a Utah Ute. He was a freshman last year, redshirted along with Nate Johnson. The 2 came in at the same time. So if Utah has to go to another, their next man up, they don't know who that is right now. So they're figuring things out on the fly at the most important position on the field. And 3 weeks out, things are still in flux for a team that is largely, kind of they're normally very structured. They're normally they have everything in control because, like I said, longest tenured head coach in college football. I'm not an expert on, just the operation aspect of things, but it just doesn't seem like a recipe for success for Utah, at least at that position right now. It's a big question mark heading into this week 1 matchup between Florida and Utah. And it could be concerning for Utah. And obviously that in turn that could help Florida keep things close as they head up there to Salt Lake. I think even if he is able to play, we all know that Rising will not be 100% in his lower half. Don't get me wrong, in the 24 games that he's started, he's a sharp passer. He has the ability to stand tall and make plays in the pocket as needed. But what's made him so reliable, so dynamic throughout his career has been his ability to just sit in the pocket and zip, or to escape the pocket, and whether it's zip balls downfield or just be willing to make runs just past the sticks. Like, he's not an Anthony Richardson type player. He's not going to make the dynamic 40, 50-yard runs that outrun guys or run over dudes, jump over dudes, things like that. But you're talking about quarterbacks in college football who are simply opportunistic in the way that they scramble, the way that they just get up out of it. Cam Rising's at the top of that list. He is. And last year, he proved that to Florida. He had 7 rushes for 91 yards, which nearly won Utah the game. If you remember correctly, he had a 28-yard scamper on the final drive of the game to get to the 19-yard line with 43 seconds left. So it gave them multiple opportunities to convert within the red zone to potentially beat Florida. Now, obviously, Amari Burney was able to intercept the pass inside the inside the end zone, make what was probably Florida's play of the year, just right off the bat in week 1 to shut down a potential loss to Utah to start Billy Napier's tenure. But they were very close to losing it because of Rising's ability to scramble when he needs to make a play with his legs when he needs to. Now there's a good chance that that's not even going to be a factor. Now there's a chance that they're not going to have that ability for Rising to, escape pressure and work down the field with his legs. He might still take off every now and then, but it's not nearly going to be at the rate that he did a season ago. And that's best case scenario for Florida. Because let me tell you something. That man, Austin Armstrong, first game as a defensive coordinator in the SEC, 30 years old. When I say that man is going to be juiced, he's going to be juiced. He's going to be ready to send some pressure after Mr. Rising. And if he trots out as a starter, Austin Armstrong is going to let them boys pin their ears back. Aggressiveness has been the number one term synonymous with Armstrong's tendencies as a play caller since he took over in Gainesville. We've been hearing all offseason, yeah, this team's going to be very aggressive. This team's going to play press man. This team's going to send simulated pressures. They're going to send blitzes every now and then. He's going to send some pressure. And it might not come in the form of traditional blitzes like I said, but let me assure you, them 4 dudes up front are going to pin their ears back and get after it. He's going to cook up a lot of different looks to throw at Cam Rising early and often, especially because he knows this man might not be able to move at the rate that he used to be able to move. And that excitement, that juice that he'll feel in his first game as an SEC coordinator, shoot, it will show in how Florida attacks this Utah offense. And with Rising's injury lingering, it only enhances Armstrong's willingness to just be send his wild dogs, as they like to call them, after the dudes, after Rising, after the backfield of Utah. Because he did it in the spring game. That was his first time just showing anybody what he was made of. He said, all right, we're getting after Mertz and Miller today. And they did. They did very well. And you just get a sense that that's going to be very similar to how he operates in Utah. Now, it might not come at the same clip. It might not come at the same, he's going to understand situations. So it's not just going to be all the time. But I assure you, he's going to send that pressure. He's going to make sure that they are feeling that Florida pass rush, that Florida, simulated pressures, because that's going to be Florida's major advantage for defending this team this upcoming year. And if Rising doesn't play, you get something similar, as Armstrong gets fresh meat behind center to work with. He gets to go after guys that are still learning to play the position at at the collegiate level. I mean, obviously, if they get Bryson Barnes out there, he'll have the opportunity to be a little bit more experienced, but you're still sending so much at a guy that's still young, is still inexperienced, that it's going to be, I think it's significantly bodes well for the Gators defense in attacking this Utah offense, whether Rising plays or not. But I will say there are two sides to that coin of Rising being injured and it helping Florida. Utah has injury issues. Sure. So does Florida. Because you look across the board right now, and they're not the only ones plagued with uncertainty at crucial positions. Florida's dealing with their own preseason attrition right now, and it's coming in several important roles. You got guys at offensive line, cornerback, tight end, linebacker, edge rusher, all spots currently riddled with injury. Micah Mazuka has been rehabilitating a torn labrum he suffered in the spring. Just got cleared to fully participate 2 days ago on Wednesday. That was the first time, or 3 days ago. He was able to run on Tuesday. So 2 days of Mazuka being fully ready to go. Then you have two guys competing for starting spots in tackle Lindell Hudson, who has been out with a concussion after suffering it in a car accident. And then you have guard Richie Leonard, who's been on the sideline for the past few days, or donning a black no-contact jersey. Tackle Cameron Waits, who went down with an torn Achilles tendon this spring, is now in a position where he is starting to see the field again, but he's a long way from being able to, being ready to go. Achilles tendon cannot be healed that quickly. Jason Marshall Jr. and Devin Moore have been out, probably your two starting cornerbacks this year. Jonathan Odom continues to rehab his injury from the bowl game against Oregon State, torn ACL. That could probably hold him out until past week one, because it's not like he can be like Rising and kind of sit there and operate in a format that allows him to play, because he's a tight end. He's going to have to be moving. He's going to have to be clanging and banging every play. Arliss Bordenhand slapped on a black jersey on Thursday. We all know Shamar James got injured. I talked about him in extensively when I went through the potential replacements at his position, which I don't know why, but I didn't even account for the fact that they could play two middle linebackers at the same time in Derek Wingo and Taraja Mitchell if Shamar cannot go, which seems like the way they are going to go, even though I think Manny Nunnery subbing in and having the other two rotate would be the recipe for success there. But that's why I don't get paid the big bucks. And then, obviously, like I said yesterday, Justice Boone goes down during the first scrimmage of the fall. So you have him go down, which there's a likelihood, and it sounds initially like that's not, necessarily the best case. They're unlike Shamar James, where it initially came out that it could be pretty bad, and it ended up not being, that serious, and that he'd be back before week one. It sounds like Justice Boone could be out for the year. And I'm not going to speculate. I'm not going to say that that's the case. But simply put, there's just a lot of dudes that are serving crucial roles for Florida that are currently sitting on the sidelines or participating limitedly in practice. And while most of the names I've just named, most of them will be ready to go week one, the amount of talent not participating in this crucial period, crucial 21-day fall camp period, it's concerning. It's concerning for Florida. It is, because it's not just, it's not just your reserves. Shamar James is arguably the best defender they have on the team. Obviously, Jason Marshall Jr. is another one up there. You have Arliss Bordenham, who's probably going to take on a major role at that tight end spot. Lindell Hudson and Richie Leonard, those two are starters. Devin Moore's a starter. You have Justin Boone as a starter. You have a lot of guys that are now not getting the opportunity to not just get their own reps, but not allowing the other guys to get reps with them. Because this is a new look Gators squad at nearly every spot you turn. New look at every spot you turn. And when you're in that position, you need reps with each other to grow chemistry. And I know, okay, well, here we go. Chemistry talk. Yeah, whatever. But right now, the Utes have an upper hand in that department. They're a long established program under Whittingham. And I know chemistry can often be overlooked or kind of, disregarded as, oh, it doesn't matter. You just need talent. It's important to be together, but it's more important to have talent on the field, which can be true in some areas. But when you have copious amount of talent, you can afford the meshing process to carry just a little bit into the season. We saw it with arguably the greatest football team of all time in 2019 in LSU. Their defense needed time to mesh. But as the year went on, that defense got progressively better and better to the point where when it was ready to go in the college football playoff national championship, they got it done. They did. They were able to supplement what that historically dominant offense could do. Florida, while I will sit here and tell you they are definitely getting stronger from a talent acquisition standpoint, just building this roster. It's an SEC caliber roster now. They still don't have that luxury to allow the meshing process to carry into the season. They need to have a good portion of it completed before they get into the year. And for a team like the Gators to outplay expectations, one of the most important factors is chemistry on and off the field. You have to have guys that are willing to play for each other off the field. I think they have that. We've heard multiple times, and I've talked about it multiple times of guys on this team saying we want to play for one another. We want to, this is the tightest team I've been on since I've gotten to the University of Florida. They want to play for each other. They want to play for their coaches and for their teammates. But while that locker room rapport is important, it's just as important on the field. It's just as vital when they step in between the white lines, because they have to know what the others are doing to ensure that they're operating at the highest level possible. And if they're not getting to do that because these injuries are piling up, then that's a concern. That is an area where Florida, is behind the eight ball. And like I said, I don't think that these linger. I don't think that they're necessarily serious, but I do think that they are they're minor. That most of these injuries are minor, but they could have long-term effects because they're not getting the opportunity to participate. And I know a practice or two isn't going to change much of that, but it's all about stacking days on days. And I know that's another cliche, but it's just important to operate in a form that allows this team to come together on the field. And if they know what, in this scenario, exactly what the other guy next to him is doing, it just gets so much easier to just go out there and play free and play at a rate that allows them to succeed. And to gloss over that fact, I think is naive. To gloss over the fact that it could potentially be something that at least affects them early in the season, I think is naive. And we're not naive over here. Nah. Not at Carroll's Cadence. We are not. We do not do naive. But like I said, there's questions at Utah with quarterback. There's questions at Florida. We'll see if those kind of get reconciled. We'll see how everything is handled for both teams moving forward. And we'll just really see what the Utes and the Gators look like as we get closer to this 2023 season kickoff, which, like I said earlier, is only 20 days away. Are we not juiced, baby? How are we not juiced? Come on now. 20 days? Yeah, man. 20 days until football is back. I love to hear it. Thank you for listening to another episode of Carroll's Cadence. If you haven't already, like this video, subscribe to the channel, Leave below a bold take for the Gators 2023 season. We're quickly growing over here, and I'm excited to keep this train rolling. Subscribe. Get us to 400 subscribers by the end of this weekend. I'm Brandon Carroll. This is Carroll's Cadence. Everybody have a great weekend, and we are out, ya baby.